If you were talking to a traditional Conservative voter now, what would you say to them?
If I was talking to a disconnected Conservative voter and a disconnected Labour voter,
not even disconnected,
just
engaged.
currently, time to vote for somebody else. Time to change the system. Yeah, 100%. There's no point if you're endorsing this. If you don't like the country the way it is now, like, it's on you. You've been voting for it.
It is a great question to put to people. Are you happy with the state of the country, and do you think it's improved over the last 10 to 20 years?
Well, it's a Ronald Reagan question. Like, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? But do you think fundamentally the country is better than it was when you were growing up? And do you think Britain? Do you think England is? Do you think they're moving in the right direction? I think if I asked that as a pollster, I think probably 75-80% of this country, maybe 90%, would say, no, I don't think this country is moving in the right direction. Well, then stop voting for the parties that are pushing you in that direction. Vote for a party that's going to push you in a different direction. That's what I would say. You have to, at some point, you have to stop looking at the mechanical logic of the system, and you have to just start exercising your voice as a citizen, and just put tactical considerations to one side and say, okay, I'm actually now going to consciously rebel and remove myself from this consensus. I'm not going to participate in this thing anymore. This is not what I want to be a part of. That's what I would recommend.
And if you I mean, like, a vision you would have for the future, obviously immigration is one, but what do you think based, I mean, I've got reforms outline manifesto here, but I mean, there's a lot in it, but where would you focus attention? I know you said immigration.
Well, to me, it's the number one issue in a country, and it feeds into so much else, from the housing crisis to the economy. I think for me, having a robust, serious policy in terms of how to end the experiment of mass immigration is the most important thing a party like Reform should have, without question. And I know what I would do. I mean, I would have an immediate freeze on all non-essential migration. By non-essential, I mean immigration that directly relates to the National Health Service and existing high-skilled worker visas. I wouldn't even talk about net zero migration. I don't think that really works for me. I'd have an immediate freeze on all non-essential migration. I would then switch instantly overnight to a high-skill migration policy from culturally compatible nations, and I would scrap the indefinite leave to remain. I would reinsert in the housing sector a preference for British families, particularly large British families, because we have a fertility crisis that we haven't even talked about yet. I would have a principle embedded in as much of the economy as I can that British families, British workers, and British taxpayers come first. I would radically overhaul our benefits system so it does not pay to live on benefits, and I would move as many of those 9 million people who are not working or who are suffering from mental health conditions and so forth into the workplace, right? And it would be a completely different economic environment. And it would be a complete break from the status quo. I'd also consider doing things like, I'd also leave the ECHR. I'd reform the Human Rights Act.
Because of the migrant.
Yeah,
issue.
I'd leave the European Convention on Human Rights so we can control our own borders and deport foreign national offenders. I'd reinstall an active deterrent, not necessarily the Rwanda scheme, but something like it, but which also ring-fence the supremacy of UK law. I would also ban cousin marriage. I would bring in life sentences for people involved in grooming gangs, not because I think that in itself will change anything, but I think it's time we started sending signals that this is Britain. We have a rule of law. We have a way of life. We're not tolerating people who are not going to respect that way of life. There's a whole host of things that I would do. But then if you have those ideas, you then have to look at the political parties, and there will never be a party that completely reflects and mirrors everything you want to do in the country. But there might be a vehicle that you can look at and think, on balance, if I get involved with that, if I get behind that, I can shape that, and I can bend the system in my direction a little bit more. And okay, maybe I only agree with 70% of what they say or 80% of what they say. But that to me looks like the most compelling vehicle that can be used to bend the system in my direction.